I am also very excited, with particularly with International Women's Day being only 2 days ago, to have this wonderful panel of Kristin, Rachel, and Nadia talking about really the future and the future of all computing. So this is an exciting moment with three women who are defining that future and really leading us that way. I have three daughters at home, and so I'm definitely showing this to them after we get the recording back so that they can see how three great women are defining the future, really. So the first thing I thought I'd do is sort of lay a little bit of context, right? We're preparing for this quantum future. Quantum computing, I think one of the most interesting things about what's going on in quantum computing right now is the fact that it feels like every time I talk about quantum computing with the experts out in the world, the time frame for when these amazing things are going to happen with quantum computing keeps getting shorter. And so every time, a few years ago, it was, well, when's this going to happen or that happen with quantum computing? It was like, oh, we're measuring in decades. It'll be a decade, decades from now. And then just 2 years ago, it was like, well, probably within 10 years. Within 10 years, we're talking about some really interesting things. And in fact, even in 2019, I think this was Google's Sycamore quantum computer, took just 3 minutes to complete a task that would have taken the fastest supercomputer in the world 10,000 years to complete, sort of showing what the possible potential was. And that was just in 2019. But here we sit today. And I have to tell you, when I go around the world asking, like, where are we with quantum computing? What's really amazing, and we're going to hear from this from the panels, is what's going on right now? How are people thinking about using quantum computers or quantum ideas and concepts right now and applying them to the world right now and in the very near future? And how much excitement and interest there is from around the world that implies the dollars are going into it and the corporate interests are going into to provide that real acceleration that I think we will all see in the quantum space here. So with that, my job is to get out of the way and let these three wonderful speakers talk. So the first thing I thought I'd do is just ask them to each introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Nadia, who's the General Manager of Simulation and Optimization at SandboxAQ. If you haven't heard of it, it's a very famous startup going out of Silicon Valley right now. But maybe, Nadia, you should give the audience some of that background.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I'm the general manager, as you said, for the simulation optimization group at SandboxAQ, where we're working to reduce the cost and the speed of bringing new drugs and materials to market using quantum-inspired and AI tools. Our company more broadly is focused on SaaS-based products that take advantage of quantum theory, such as quantum sensors for navigation and medical imaging, as well as cybersecurity solutions, which we'll talk about, which guard against the vulnerability of digital information when quantum computers do become available. Just by way of background, so SandboxAQ and I have personally spun out from Google about a year ago after incubating for several years. I originally joined Google because after many years of clearing hardware and software medical devices in over 70 different countries, for companies like Johnson & Johnson and Siemens, I realized that the only way that I could drive the software as a medical device industry forward into real health decision-making that had an impact on patients was to attempt it at Google AI scale. And that's what I did. It's such a pleasure to be among this talented group of women today. And I would really like to thank the Asia Society for having me and looking forward to a great discussion.
Great. Thanks, Nadia. I think you're very impressive background and only one of the reasons why Sandbox and you are so famous in the Valley. And I think in the world, we have a nice relationship between our firm and Sandbox. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of companies around the world are quite interested in maybe even more than interested in what Sandbox is doing and how they're leading in this combined quantum concepts with AI combination world. Rachel Zhang, I'll call you on you next, Managing Director and the Head of Fixed Income Front Office Technologies at Jefferies. Hi, Rachel. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jeff. As Jefferies Global Head of Fixed Income Tech, it's my responsibility to not only solve problems today, but also set up a vision to well position the business in the future rapidly changing tech landscape. And then when I talk about what's rapidly changing, computing power has been a game changer in the past, and it will continue to be a game changer for every single industry vertical out there. The very first personal computer, if you remember, has just made available 50 years ago. But today, my smartphone, anybody's smartphone, has more computing power than all of the computer power used to send the very first human being to the moon. So that's why I'm very excited as a hardware technologist. I'm very excited to be here today to discuss quantum computing with Jeff and the other panelists. And for those of you who are not familiar with Jefferies, it's the biggest independent investment bank in the world with 60 years of history.
So Rachel brings together both the technical expertise, but also that client customer investment view that I think people on this call, I think will be really, really interested to hear about, not just where we are, but how much activity there is in the space. It's really quite remarkable. And then Kristin is the EY Global Innovation Quantum Leader. We obviously know each other very well, but Kristin, why don't you introduce yourself to the Asia Society community?
Thank you so much, Jeff. Hi, everyone. I am Kristin Gilkes. I am bringing this to you from my home in Washington, D.C. I run our global computing lab, as Jeff mentioned, and we are focused on trust, transformation, and sustainability. My background, I'm a mathematician, and I focused in quantum decision sciences from an academic lens perspective. And then I took a career jaunt and I worked in manufacturing. I ran operations for a large steel corporation, which has some tie into where we're going with quantum sensing, which is really, really fun. And then I, worked with, and I still do, I lead our financial crime and fraud technology and analytics practice as well for EY. And I think all of that is really important because as we're going to talk about today, Jeff, is the relevance of how we bring quantum to everyone today. So the things that we're exploring in our lab are things like anomaly detection, which is really, really valuable in both preventative maintenance kind of areas, but then also like manufacturing, and then also anomaly detection in fraud, which would be really valuable to Rachel's institution. And so our lab is exploring some phenomenal use cases all the way from DNA sequencing to portfolio optimization. So really excited to be here today with all of you and looking forward to the conversation we're going to have. Back to you, Jeff.
Great. So let's jump into it. I'll go to Nadia, you first. You're on the ground every day, sort of taking these concepts and applying quantum concepts in a practical way today with customers on the ground. Can you give us a little bit of that context? What are people doing with quantum today? Because I think the audience thinks, wow, this is a great computing idea, but maybe it's just for the future. But I think what you and Sandbox are saying is, no, there are things we're doing right now.
Yeah, so first I think it's like a semantic clarification. So quantum computers, as they're available today, are available in somewhat of like a prototype fashion. Mm-hmm. So if you go to IBM's quantum computer, you try to use it, this is the fashion that you could use it in. It's very limited types of use cases and so forth. In terms of like that development, that's what you hear about, where it's maybe going to take decades. I just heard Peter Shore say maybe 2 decades. So Jeff, I think you were mentioning that the time window seems to be getting smaller. I'm seeing it sort of like get a little larger depending on who you ask. But we're seeing that companies are actually building quantum computers for applications like drug discovery. So Novo Nordisk put a huge investment not too long ago for this particular effort. And then we're seeing that there are companies out there that, they look at their existing toolbox and it is not sufficient and they need to adopt new techniques. And the physics-based techniques by the way that they work via quantum mechanics, they are accurate. They are adopting AI in these techniques as well. And so these types of technologies, we call them AQ, it really readies the market to adopt these technologies in the future as they become available. And so, while quantum computers are really far away, we don't have to wait until they become available. We know that, like quantum computers, it threatens basically our security architecture. It threatens basically all of the things that underpin our society, the internet, the energy grid, government, financial markets. They will all be vulnerable to encryption schemes. And it takes about 10 years to migrate over to these new protocols that we now have available to us to actually adopt. And so we can start today, right? So there are things that we can do today. And just at a practical point, we can also run certain limited use cases on today's GPUs and TPUs, right? We can run those complex simulations and even quantum calculations on today's hardware to get that accuracy in situations that you might otherwise only think that a quantum computer can do. So there are definitely areas here that we can explore today that companies can already start to work on.
That's great, Nadia. And I think we want to we'll come back in a minute to that question about quantum security and cybersecurity stuff, because I think that'll be an important, interesting one for all the C-suite executives listening in on this. But Rachel, I thought I'd go to you next and sort of think about what is there's a lot of dollars going into the space, or if it seems like there's a lot of dollars, and clearly you're your firm and you are the expert on that. Can you sort of comment on what you're seeing in terms of the traction or the dollars that you're seeing put out in different parts of the world?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a great question, and I think the public side and the government-owned investment are very separate. So I'm just going to focus on private investment trending. And I can explain this from a few different perspectives. The first is by time, the second is by region, and the third is by different funding stages. So quantum investment has been active in the past more than a decade, but it really accelerated 2 years ago. So I want to show you one picture that let data tell the story.
Great, it's up for me, Rachel.
Can you see my chart?
Yes, we can see it.
Got it.
Okay, great. So basically, what you're looking right now is in the past 10 years, all the investment, private investment that has went into the 10 years into the quantum computing companies. And the line is number of deals, and the bar is total dollar amount. So as you can say, it's proof that it's accelerating. Although the number of deals has relatively flat in the past 5 years, but it really accelerated in the past 2 years. So that is one evidence of a strong sentiment, strong momentum. And then now let's take this total number in mind, and I'm going to show you the regional breakdown. So this is a regional breakdown of what it looks like. So if we go to the left-hand side of the chart, you can say it's very strong in North America. In US alone, we are seeing 270 companies with more than half of the 7 billion goes into the US-based startups, and a very strong momentum in Canada as well. And then now if we move to the middle, Europe is roughly 1/4 of the total private investment. And the most active country names mentioned there, including UK, France, Germany, and Finland. And now, if you go to the APAC region, it looks like the investment is small, but not really, because as I mentioned, the public funding is completely separately organized by government. So I have the third graph to show you, which is a latest investment research just came out in January of this year to show that there are over 55 billion in the world. invested in the research and the companies. So if you look at the small blue box on the left bottom, which highlights a trend breakdown by region, it completely reversed what we just saw on the previous page. Because you are saying now APAC is more than half, and the country to call out is China as leading 25 billion. It's a leader in both depth and the funding amount. And then if you move to the second, it's Europe, and then the same names jump out, which means those countries are paying attention. And historically, the companies, including UK, Germany, and France, have a very solid foundation on the research. And then move on to North American, it says less than 10, but that's because it's mostly on the private side. So on the government investment side, there is in the research report, it also said it's actually one of the most organized and well-funded initiatives since the World War II.
Wow. Rachel, I think you highlighted it, but I just always, every time I see this chart, every time we talk about it, it just sort of highlights the excitement, I guess, the acknowledgement of the potential in this by, the big research institutions, but in particular governments around the world. While your first chart was already impressive to see that ramp up of investments to quantum companies around the world, to note the size and scale of those country investments, the government investments, is pretty remarkable. And then because we're, on an Asia Society call, to particularly note the influence of China centrally inside of, if you look even more broadly across Asia, the remarkable dollars. I mean, China's investment alone was nearly half of the entire total amount. And I think that serves as an understanding that of how much momentum there will continue to be in the quantum space, and frankly, how different regions of the world are competing heavily to be an important part of the quantum story as we look forward. Go ahead, Rachel.
I think the one last point I would like to make to other quantum investors is compared to other technology investment, quantum technology has much longer time to market. It's a lot more cost extensive development, but it's a lot more disruptive once it's available. So please remain realistic in your expectation and stay informed about all the challenges that ahead of us in the quickly evolving, exciting space.
Yes, it is very quickly evolving, exciting, but yes, that I think it is important for us to have that measured view, right? Understanding some of the challenges we look for. Kristin, you talk to clients around the world on this, countries and clients around the world on this. How are you seeing this play out? I mean, we see sort of Nadia talking about some of the practical applications. We'll get into some of those ideas and concepts for the group. We saw Rachel talking about some of the numbers, the really mind-blowing numbers associated with this. But yeah, being on the ground with customers and clients every day, how are you seeing this play out around the world?
Yeah, it's really critical to the infrastructure, and just a shout out to the Quantum Insider who provides a lot of those statistics to us. And this source was on the bottom of all of those slides, but they really keep us up to date on where those investments are coming from, and tons of other information as well. But Singapore, for example, quantum is vital to their future, and I would even say it's vital to their future survival, right? Maritime investment is everything. And then it's a small island. What do they do with their trash? I mean, just something very simple and practical, but it means a lot to that government and to that country. So we are finding use cases around, and they are exploring today, use cases around optimizing logistics and demand planning. And so that's something that we're executing as well out of our lab, is that demand planning and that demand forecasting. And so I think it brings a level of awareness that the value of quantum is a couple-fold. One is that it presents back to you a possible solution that you wouldn't have necessarily expected in a classical environment. And so where we may not be able to do all of the computation today in a quantum environment, it does give us novel results that we can then feed back into a classical environment. So it's really that hybrid infrastructure today that we're depending on, that Nadia alluded to, and Rachel as well. And so it's research like that a lot of our clients and both governments and corporates alike are exploring. We have financial institutions who are looking at portfolio optimization, and a lot of them are not necessarily, so full disclosure, we've not reached something called quantum advantage. So that day has not arrived. It's not arriving tomorrow. But the results that we are seeing really do present something net new, and a lot of the portfolio optimization that's being done out of some of the largest institutions in the world, they're doing it for muscle memory. So they are getting this in place because they realize that the amount of time it takes to modify the infrastructure to utilize a result out of a quantum computer, it's going to take some time, but they don't want to miss that tipping point of when everything is actually ready.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important point, right? Getting ready for the moment. And so I'm gonna bring it back because Nadia, I think you brought this up as well, sort of the time frames, right? But the despite what you think about the time frames, that it's important to get ready now. So I'll throw up a couple specific topics for the whole group, right? So quantum cybersecurity, right? So everybody, the favorite story of the media is quantum's going to break encryption, our current state of encryption. When it does it, all your old secrets are going to be laid bare. That's probably scary for a lot of governments and critical infrastructure of the world. Less scary for me, because then you just figure out when I'm going to get my next haircut. That's all you're going to find out from my email. So A is, are we close to that moment? Maybe, maybe not, is what I think I'm hearing from all three of you. Maybe. So we'd love to hear any perspectives you have on that moment. But why is it important that people get ready today then? So anybody, because I know all three of you work on this idea.
I'm happy to jump in here. I think it's an important point, Kristin, that you made about the infrastructure, because I think people have in their minds maybe that when quantum computers become available, there's going to be like this turnover, like, we're not going to have one in our house, right? So, classical hardware is not going anywhere. And, quantum computers also won't be the right tool to use to solve every type of problem. They'll be useful for certain complicated types of mathematical equations, crunching a lot of data that we just can't do today. But we're always going to have this hybrid kind of compute world, at least in the foreseeable future. And so, the more we sort of get used to integrating this type of like multi-scale kind of hybrid computational power, I think the more it prepares businesses to scale their infrastructure so that they're used to the next new thing that becomes available.
Absolutely. And then on cybersecurity, I know there's governments and financial service firms getting ready now. Kristin, did you want to?
Yeah, I think that, being very balanced with, the world's not going to end. Is there data that's being harvested today? The different national security agencies around the globe consistently say that the answer to that is yes. So we are in a position where we want to use more advanced approaches. And that means not even necessarily quantum approaches, but there are things that you can do today to kind of prepare your institution. So quantum key distribution is something that is available today, that is, it's not widely used, but it is readily available and it can scale. So exploring those kind of areas are important to your overall strategy. And just echoing the point here that Nadia was making is that moving a large institution to a new framework, it takes time. So you can't really afford to wait 5-10 years to start taking some of those good hygiene practice steps today.
And so go ahead, Rachel.
The cybersecurity node, from where I sit, the financial industry is amongst one of the most sensitive industries on this topic because of the sensitive financial information and the client data we have. So I think it's not an optional problem. It's not an optional problem for us to solve. We have to solve it if there is a real threat. It kind of reminded me back in 1999, we have this year 2000 bug, and we have to solve it. It's not optional. But I think from where I sit, I would like to work with all technology financial service providers to leverage their technology, because that's a universal problem. So once the solution has become available, we'll be very engaging into testing and deploy over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah,
go ahead, Nadia.
I was going to say, I think that's a great point. Certain industries need to maintain a defensive posture, right? Not in a preparedness posture. And so, government agencies kind of get this because it's a matter of, national security. But telecommunications, they need like a first line of defense if our grid goes down. Financial services, as you mentioned, pharmaceutical and tech sectors, they own a ton of IP that leaves vulnerable to these types of attacks. And, I'm not sure that and folks get up in the morning and think about this from a CISO perspective, but perhaps they should, right? Because from a preparedness perspective, I think we could sort of reason that, if we at least understand what are the instances of vulnerability, then at least you sort of know where you stand, right? And then you can decide, okay, this is a today problem or tomorrow problem.
So one thing I will encourage the audience to do is if you have questions, please submit your questions along the way. We're going to try to get to them along the way. We'll leave a little bit of time for them at the end as well. So please do, if you work in a particular industry or have a particular role and want to see how does it apply to me, please feel free to ask. I actually wanted to hit on financial services because I think, Kristin, you talked about portfolio optimization, but Rachel, you run technology for a big part of Jefferies. So I'm curious, clearly there's the quantum security question, but how do you think your industry thinks about quantum and portfolio optimization or risk or fraud or other things where it can optimize for your particular firm and your particular industry?
I would like to answer this question from two completely different perspectives. The first perspective is from the different stages of funding cycle. So as investment banks, we help companies to fund throughout the full life cycle of their funding stages. At this point, it's either VC-sponsored or early stage VC or government sponsored. But as those companies mature, they will come to the later stage, which means our bankers will get involved in a merger and acquisition or take the lead of the IPO to take them to public. And then our secondary bond or stock traders will help to provide the liquidity and the pricing in the secondary open market. And our research analysts will be covering research to provide guidance to investors on how to invest on those sectors. So it pretty much touches every role of the capital markets. That's why people need to pay attention that this is coming, this very disruptive technology is coming. And then the second part that really affects the financial industry is to embrace the super speed computing power. So I get very excited when the news first came and said, oh, it's over 100 million times faster than the most powerful classic computer we have today. And then I would always chat with my friends or colleagues and like, oh, what would you do? You have a supercomputer? It's just like a fun coffee time topic. And I think for the capital markets clients, this is going to be a weapon for us to leverage to be able to improve market efficiency and the better service of institutional clients. Computer power is always something that we look for. We need more. We're dealing with so much data. So with the super speed computation, maybe we'll be able to provide a better pricing, better liquidity to our institutional investors. Maybe the commodities trading will be redefined once the expert can accurately predict the weather. And then, or we can improve our risk profiling that helps to run a lot more stress analysis to identify any hidden risks for investment decisions, just to name a few examples.
That's great, Rachel. Kristin, I'm going to come to you, and then we're getting sort of a flood of questions in from several questions in from the audience. So I might try to work in after I ask you. I'll take the primacy to ask you one more question at least, and hopefully we'll get to some other parts of sort of the community wanting to get in on this conversation. But Kristin, Rachel gave some examples of financial services, but she broadened it out. I know that there's been discussions around molecule discovery. Quantum, can you find where the new oil fields are from the sensing the technology out there? What are you seeing in terms of practical concepts that you're saying, okay, this is where people can head over the next 3 years? And what are some sort of more wild things that you see customers and clients thinking about when they think about 6, 7, 8 years out, or some time frame further in the future?
Yeah, so the things that are available to us today, quantum sensing is one of those. I get really, really excited about quantum communications because the ability to interlock communities throughout a very large distance at this point through quantum nodes is also something that can be done now. There's not very many cities in the world that have explored it, so I think that's going to be on our horizon. And then everything in the cyber quantum safe kind of arena, there are can we be post-quantum encrypted safe today? We can all debate that, but I definitely think that there are things that institutions are doing today, like with the help of Sandbox, with the help of our amazing cyber team, that you can do as part of your good hygiene and your resiliency program. And then also introducing the key distribution that we talked about earlier. So those are some of the fun things that are available to the community today. The sensing, I think, is really going to pick up a lot of pace in the biomedical arena and also in manufacturing, some of the infrastructure areas that Nadia was talking about as well. As far as the meat, almost everything on the table is fascinating to me in this space, Jeff. That's why I love it. And, have the privilege of running our global team. I wake up excited every day about, the new devices that are studying different areas, the work that Nadia does. We had more time to talk to Nadia. The passion really comes out in her wanting to, make a measurable difference for healthcare around the globe. And those are all the opportunities that we have in this space, because again, in quantum, 2 + 2 could be pink. It offers a different reality to us than what classical computing does. And it's really exciting all the way around.
I like the 2 + 2 = pink. I think our audience probably got a possibility in the probabilistic curve that is pink. I lied for a second to our audience. Nadia, I do actually want to hear about that. How do you think quantum is going to impact the medical sort of your original sort of statement of wanting to have real impact on medical and healthcare, because I think that's a broad-based impact. And then I'll get to some of the questions that audiences are posing. So Nadia?
Funny enough, we were discussing the color of quantum at a recent leadership offsite for Sandbox, and we landed on orange. Orange is the color of quantum, so that's the new rumor. But I love the pink as well. No, the areas that I get really excited about are with respect to simulation and optimization, because those are the areas that people think that they have to wait for a quantum computer to really tackle in a hefty way. But I think we can do a lot today, particularly in the area of drug discovery. And when you look at drug discovery, it takes over 10 years. It costs billions of dollars, and the risk of failure is so high. It's like over 70% failure rate in clinical trials, and in no other industry would this be permitted. And so, it's like the economics just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, and I think that, like, companies are looking, they have a lot of phase 3 failures, and they have things in their pipeline, and they're looking to say, okay, maybe the way that we've done it all of the time is not adequate. And so if you were to, apply these AI tools where you take advantage of reasoning over large amounts of data, and you are able to apply some of the quantum mechanical techniques that we have developed, you can get these accurate answers and feed that into your system so that you can reduce that risk downstream. And so that's what we want to do. Like, we want to put a lot of new molecules out there on the marketplace so that we ultimately, first of all, bring access to patients, but really reduce the cost over the course of everyone along the value chain. So payers, providers, healthcare practitioners, the whole gamut, right? That's the goal.
Well, Nadia, it would be really exciting, because I think improvement of the healthcare is improvement for all society. And then which country does it hopefully doesn't matter. Hopefully it'll just help everybody. So now back to my promise to the audience. So I'm going to start reading out some of the questions. I'm trying to sort and organize on the fly, but it is a very active audience, which I love. So I'll ask the first question. What are some of the possibilities or promises of quantum computing and technology as it concerns the security of communications? Right? Will quantum technology eventually reach a stage when quantum communications will become entirely impregnable or otherwise immune to interception or attack? So I don't know who, basically, questions about using quantum and security of communications. Jump ball for anybody who wants to take that on.
Yeah, I tend to stay away from big, grandiose statements. So I think I would bring it back to answering that question by saying that there are, we can't as a society rely on satellites and GPS forever. That's not something that our militaries or national security groups around the globe, or even manufacturing or big oil and gas companies are interested in doing either, because they need to explore things that are GPS deprived. So I think that the advances in quantum communication are quite exciting, because we are being able to facilitate some of that communication between quantum nodes that have really good promise of being secured, but then also with the novelty of doing them in environments that are GPS denied. So I think that, Nadia, would you add anything to that?
I would just add, absolutely. One thing to note is that we have a great standard agency in the United States, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Yeah. And over the last 6 years, they have spent time reviewing all kinds of PQC, so post-quantum cryptography encryption algorithms that they held up possible for standardization. After a very, very long and arduous process, they've down-selected those. And so we have these encryption protocols available today that we can already start to encrypt, things like WhatsApp messages. Those are subject to, hacking. I mean, most of us don't care about our personal conversations, but, it's just an example of like how just widespread this encryption problem is. But folks can start to adapt the NIST standards today. And so that's something really tangible that can be done to kind of protect against these future communication attacks that we're talking about.
I think we're going to have to continue on the what is really practical. I want to come back to that at the end, like what can somebody do today? But I want to go to Rachel. Somebody is asking a question about connecting industry problems to what is sort of the abstract quantum today. But I want to actually take it perhaps, if you don't mind, from the investor point of view, right? Like, so if you're an investor, you have a lot of these advanced technologies to invest in today. There's pure AI, there's generative and all the fun things around ChatGPT and all that world. And then there's quantum computing, which clearly has a lot of momentum and dollars into it. How should if you're an investor how should you think about the opportunity of investment here, which is earlier on in its cycle, but has these massive, massive implications? And that's sort of what I read into. You want to be practical industry. That's where the dollars and cents really start to roll in at scale, although they're all rolling in today. But you're sort of in this more building up phase of this technology. How do you talk to investors? How do you think investors think about that?
Mm-hmm. So speaking of early stage, and like it takes a long time, but eventually will be disruptive. I think everybody just experienced the one wave of the chat GPT. Everybody was trying that. And it's funny, last week that Jeff said, I'm going to ask you those 5 questions. So I did a quick experiment. So in 10 minutes, basically what I did is the step 1, I threw those 5 questions to ChatGPT. Of course, very quickly, I got all the answers. And then step 2, I went to a virtual reality avatar. I made a virtual assistant of myself. And then I said, just read those scripts. And then it came out amazing. And the whole thing took me less than 10 seconds. So my first thought was, okay, great, I can be lazy and put this on autoplay, go shopping at Friday afternoon. And my second thought was, okay, that's a quick way to lose audience because it's kind of boring. So what I want to say to the investors is, to me, as somebody who build product automation all day long, put ideas into reality, this is computing power. This is very exciting, but then it's part of the ecosystem. So if you have today's computer that you can create such a simple thing in 10 minutes, and then did everybody saw in the news, ChatGPT also passed the MBA exam from the UPenn Wharton as well as the law degree. So if today with classic computer you can do this, imagine you're giving the same AI tools 100 million times more computing power. What can we do there? So I think really to the investors, this is not isolated, right? This is involving the latest breakthrough of AI is not mathematics breakthrough. It's computing power breakthrough, right? The mathematics hasn't changed for many, many years. So it's part of the ecosystem that maybe one thing happened would trigger something else completely, like who would know it completely disrupted the education system. I thought it's a technology problem, and all of a sudden all the people got concerned are journalists and education sectors. So it's all intertwined. That's why it's very, very important to understand how they come together. So for the investors, it's very, very important to understand how they come together. And then for another group of audience, which is technology adopters, then like I think Nadia touched a lot of this. It's like, this is not a silver bullet. Once you have it, like all the problems in the world will be solved. It's please spend the time to study, understand the limitation, understand the advantage, how you can use it. And Kristin also mentioned classic computer is not going away. This will be a hybrid mode. And the adoption of quantum computing, I think back to what we did in the past 10 years to migrate to cloud computing. So 2 decades ago, I was working in another Wall Street company, then basically how do we have great like supercomputing power. We purchase 1,000 computers and we hire a team and say, please watch them. And then often I have a production, they're like, oh, one node was not responding. I'm like, can you restart it? So no, all of that was gone, but it did take me a decade. They did take the industry a decade to gradually move into the cloud. So then to the quantum companies who are making those technologies, what I want to say is please make the adoption as easy as possible. I look back like 10 years ago, all the developers got into the cloud world. It's like a candy store. I'm like, where do I even start? There are like 500 tools available right there. And then we really started by from what problem are you trying to solve and work backwards.
Yeah, that's important. And just a disclaimer to the audience, all three panelists and myself are live. No avatars are used for today's talk. These are all our answers, not ChatGPT driven. I have a couple of quick industry questions that I see coming up. For Kristin, somebody said, given your manufacturing background, can you share some applications for quantum computing and manufacturing? They talk about the quality domain specifically, but maybe you can answer it either way, just about manufacturing in general. Do you see how this can be used in that space?
Yeah. So, timely question just based on conversations that I had today. But in manufacturing today, a lot of quality control is done manually by your eyesight and chemicals. And so we can, there's sensing companies around the world, few that are phenomenal, and we have found one or two that are really, really great at this. And one of them is around testing for, the quality control testing that goes into the manufacturing process of steel pipe, for example. And you can think about the reliance that you need to have when something goes into a car or, something that a human life depends on. So, that's really exciting application that's available today from a sensing perspective, but from a quantum computation perspective, those are use cases. So, again, we haven't reached quantum advantage yet, but we are in manufacturing, we're studying supply and demand. So we have demand planning, and in the classical environment, you are limited to the number of variables that you can optimize it in any one given time, or that you can use as forecast variables at any one given point of time. And in quantum, you're only limited by the hardware at this point. So there are some really neat applications where we can look at all the different components that go into the logistics of supply for a manufacturing arm, and then also optimize on sustainability factors. So that's, an exciting opportunity to be able to say that, your manufacturing process is optimized for both things, both very complex things at the same time.
Great. And I'm going to do quickly, Nadia. One of the questions is, do you think quantum computing might help solve some uncurable diseases? Because you were talking about medical applications earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Kristin's point, we haven't achieved quantum advantage just yet, but that's absolutely the goal. But in the near term, even, our team at Sandbox, we get really excited when someone comes to us and they say, we have an undruggable disease, which means, they can't figure out exactly how to drug it. They've tried other tools on the market. Nothing in biology leads them to believe that this is possible. And we get really excited applying the physics-based methods to these techniques, because that at least is progress in pushing this forward. So we're very hopeful in this domain.
And Nadia, some of the work that we're able to do together is really exciting, because like I said, Jeff, earlier, one of our use cases, because we are so hyper focused on the problem set, that Nadia and our teams were able to find a unique outcome from the quantum mechanics that we wouldn't have thought to even explore in a classical environment to begin with. So then when we have that output, we can then tailor our classical algorithms and really fine tune and go after that advantage. So, it's really, really exciting what we can do.
Absolutely. And this is in the cancer space that Kristin is referencing. So.
And this is just so heartening, again, for all of society to hear that we have this emerging technique. I'll just say emerging technique that are a set of techniques that allow us to address what we perhaps thought was a previously intractable problem. And that's a really wonderful way to apply this technology and really just have positive impact on the world. Rachel, I'll give you the chance. You can decline to answer this or say you don't have a strong perspective on it. But someone did ask sort of the relationship between quantum computing and blockchain technology. So I don't know if you see that in your bank, or if you don't see that, sort of what's the most profound impact of quantum computing on blockchain technology?
It's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it, but I'm pretty sure it will enable some of the breakthrough there. So when I was working, this was maybe 6 years ago, I was working with some companies trying to do some of the proof of concept on blockchain. And then at that time, the bottleneck is still number one, the number of transactions we can process per second compared to even the normal systems that we have. And the number two is the authentication. And then there was a wave of, because of sanction, it led to, okay, so if you are saying you are decentralized, then why are we able to desanction, right? So I think there are a lot of challenges still around become a reality, and there is also sort of like this blockchain is sort of like all in or nothing type of approach, because if you're the only one person, why it kind of defeats the purpose. So I feel like from what I've seen, at least from the investment perspective, is it actually dropped a little bit compared to starting from last 6 months, the hyper content generation type of use case just become a big burst to replace those type of topics that was once like a very, very hot topic. But like I mentioned, I think we can't predict the future. We are talking about a few new technologies that will redefine the future. We don't know what exactly those are, but that's exactly what makes it interesting, because we can all sit here, talk for days and hours to say, oh, if I had this, I think this will happen. No, I don't think so. So I think that's what it makes it interesting.
So we're coming to sort of the end of the time we have. So I did want to give each of you an opportunity to talk about sort of the specific question, which is, so we have an audience here of senior executives, C-suite, who are interested in advanced technologies and how they impact themselves in the world, but also their companies that they help manage and run. So in 2 minutes each or 1 minute each, what should an executive at a company be doing today? Like what should they be doing today to get ready, to be thoughtful, to experiment? Like what is your advice to the audience in essence? Rachel, since you're I'll start with you, put you on the hot seat first.
First of all, I cannot guarantee I'm not an avatar today. I really can't. And second of all, to your point, a CEO and a C-suite, they're very busy and they have a lot of other questions to answer, respond to shareholders, and the operation of the business have a lot of day-to-day and dealing with ever-changing market. So I think it's the technologist's job, actually, like people like us, like CTOs, it's our job to put this in front of the one level up to say, this is important and this should be part of what we talk about.
Great. Rachel, thank you. Nadia, you're next.
Yeah, I kind of touched a little bit on some of the practical things we can do today. So maybe I'll take a different spin at answering this question, which is the quantum workforce. So, this is an area I think where quantum computing and just quantum technologies, this whole field, even what we do at SandboxAQ, requires highly specialized skills and knowledge. And there's just a shortage of experts in the field, and it's slowing down our progress. We could go faster if we just had more experts. And I think, we have to really embody asynchronous training, right? So training alongside the technical development. And at Sandbox, we've doubled down on these partnerships with university, not only to create curriculum around this topic, but also to bring people in and train them, get them hands-on training to help close this gap. And I think more companies could be doing a lot more in the space, right? If more companies did more, I think we could really build out the quantum ecosystem and get to that future state much faster.
Wow, Nadia. So you're highlighting the talent shortage, really, that we have in the space. And one of the questions that I had, which we didn't get to quite, was like making sure that as we think through that talent base, how do we make sure it's a diverse talent base that we're bringing up? And it sounds like the pipeline needs to be long and far enough. We may have to reach not just university, but before university to make sure we're continuously bringing not just a robust pipeline, but a diverse pipeline in that space. Great. Kristin, when you talk to clients, what do you tell them? Like if they say, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, what should a CEO be doing?
Yeah, I think a good hygiene practice in your cybersecurity suite is absolutely fundamental. And you would be amazed, Jeff, how many do not have good hygiene. So just fundamental practices there of inventorying your tools, having a good resiliency plan, and then getting a strategy in place for this post-quantum encryption world, and then taking those active steps to inventory and things like that you can do with partners like us in Sandbox. Those are very quantum safe kind of approaches to do today. And then on the fun offensive side, I think it's great to start exploring those use cases, get that muscle memory in there, training the workforce. I love it. And, in that Quantum Mania article in Fortune, I did talk about the WASP and making sure that we bring women and other diversity to STEM, because it is so important. So, that's a passion of mine that you'll see me kind of spearheading along with the journey. So
first of all, I wanted to say thank you. I know we're running to the last few minutes here. So I first wanted to thank all three of you, Rachel, Nadia, and Kristin, for being with us today on a Friday afternoon. Rachel, and you said you could be out shopping and sending your avatar instead. No, we distinctly appreciate all of your time. And on that note about diversity in this, it's again, I just want to come back to where we started. International Women's Day was 2 days ago, and I can't believe the honor and privilege that I have to be able to talk to three women leaders in this emerging space. And I think what we heard as an audience today, sort of quantum is coming. It'll sort of come in these interesting paced way. It may still take some time, but there are practical implications to today and practical applications that if you are running a company or running a division or on the board of a company, you should be thinking about some of these aspects of quantum right now and applying them right now. And then what I also appreciated is some of the dialogue around that promise of what is possible in the future, right? What it will allow us to do, the directions it'll take us. We didn't get to the questions about climate change and metaverse, but we did get to some of the questions of how it might change manufacturing, how it might change financial services, and of course, I think for all of us, how it might change medicine and drug discovery for the benefit of all of us. So thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for your wonderful and participation. Strong participation in this panel. We hope you enjoyed our discussion this afternoon.